Thank you, Robert. Good morning.
Good morning.
I just wanted to take a moment to just take everybody in. I'm so glad that you're here today. I'm glad to be here today. And I just wanted to let you know that I know many of you recognize me. I've been up here before doing announcements and all kinds of stuff. And I've served in our community in so many ways. I served on the board. I've worked with wiht. I've taught our teens. And it is currently my pleasure to serve as a practitioner for our community. And I'm very grateful for that. And I get to be the chair of the committee that is looking for our next spiritual director. So that's not only exciting, but it provides us with so many opportunities to reflect and think about what it is that we want, because we know our community does that. What do we want? We want to create that. But before I dive in, I actually am going to need your help. Anybody willing to help me today? All right, thank you. I was anticipating that. So, I'm going to give you a cue, and when I give you that cue, I'll give you the response. When you hear me say, I stand before you today, your response will be, because that's not the end of the story. Got it?
Yeah.
Shall we practice?
No.
Somebody said no. Thank you, Dawn. Appreciate it, keeping me on my toes. I stand before you today. Thank you. You got it. Thank you. So, I died on a Sunday in August in 1985 in a little storefront church in Harlem, New York. I died. There wasn't anything particularly unique or special about the day. It was a beautiful day. It was kind of balmy, late August. I'd gone to church with my family, which was kind of typical. I was raised in a Pentecostal church, so we would have these long services. I think we invented long services. We would take a break in between services for a couple of hours and eat and, kind of reassemble later on. So at the time, I had a little boyfriend, and me and my best friend decided that we would go for a walk. There was a park that wasn't too far by. And so we decided, hey, let's go take a walk in between the services. So we took our walk, we kind of meandered around the park. We could hear the sounds of the basketball players kind of playing basketball, and the sound of the basketball hitting the ground, and the sounds of their sneakers kind of hitting the pavement, and just, that kind of sound that kind of emerges when people are playing basketball out in public. So we just, took our walk and enjoyed the park and enjoyed the day. We were not aware, however, that there were several of the younger boys from the church that had kind of trailed us. And so they were kind of like, just in the background, not really making their presence known. And we got to a place and we kissed. And that kiss kind of revealed them, right? They were like, oh my God, what are you guys doing? You're kissing. And off they ran. They ran back to the church. And within a few minutes, there was an adult there that was now going to escort us back to the church. And so I thought, oh gosh, what's going on? By the time we had returned, the evening service had begun. As I said, we had very, very long services. Our evening service usually began around 6 or 7. And what was unusual about this is that it had started, and the pastor, who happened to be my godmother at the time, had already taken the podium, and she was ready, and the congregation was kind of, very hyped. They were very excited, and they were kind of cheering and shouting at kind of some of the stuff that she was saying. So I thought, oh my gosh. So into this environment, into this excitement we walked. Well, this atmosphere, this charged atmosphere, we were invited to come forward, to stand in front of the community and atone for our sins. Ooh, that's a heavy one. I heard some breathing. People were like, what is going on? Where is she going? And so we were asked to kind of answer. And when I say answer, I don't actually mean answer. We had to listen. We said nothing. We just listened to her provide whatever she wanted to provide. We listened to the chants of the crowd and this kind of cacophony that kind of took over. We listened to that. And at the end of that, we were officially sat down. That was our punishment. We were not permitted to participate in certain activities, and we, had our little time off, or what they would say nowadays would be time out. So, as you can imagine, I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I felt so much shame and just anger, and I was confused. I did not understand how I could arrive at this point and have this experience. And what about Jesus? Didn't he say something about he who's without sin cast or something like that? But somehow that message was lost in all of that. And so I was left with feeling the way I was feeling and maneuvering through that. At times, I was depressed and suicidal in the years after that. The experience of the moment was so debilitating that I literally felt like I died. That there was a part of me that was left right there on the stage, in that moment, seared into the carpet. But I stand before you today. Yes. No, it's not, and no, it wasn't. It was just one, right? I mean, we all kind of had those experiences. You may not have had an experience as extreme as mine, but you certainly have had experiences where you felt stuck and stifled. So I dubbed this my Lazarus story, right? Because I understood, as time went on, I understood that no, I didn't actually die in that moment, that although I felt like a part of me was left there, that there was something in me that was pulling me and calling me forward. I've identified it as that primordial spirit, that spirit that is what we talk about in our community, that's behind the thing. That's always calling us forward. That's always saying, you can get through this. You will get through this. I like the way Wayne Dyer says. He says, it is that secret that sits at the center and knows. That is what was calling me. So, it begins with forgiveness, the F word. Everybody's been wondering, what is the F word? What word is she talking about? And I had a few choice F words as a result of that experience, as you can imagine. But the F word we want to focus on today is forgiveness. Because I had to realize as, a part of that journey, a part of the journey to and through forgiveness is, for me, it wasn't linear. It wasn't, that happened and I forgave and I moved on and I didn't, have to think about it. No. I had to go back to it. I had to examine it. I had to look at it. I had to be willing to. And I had to understand that the process of forgiveness, sometimes it's not, sometimes you do have to go back. Sometimes you feel like you get stuck and you got to look at it again. So that's what I had to do. I understood what Christ said when he said that when you forgive, you have to do it 70 times 7. I don't think that that's the end point. Sometimes it has to be more, right? But I understood that it was a process. I realized, as one of the authors from the Science of Mind textbook that I got to read writes, to fully realize our individual lives, it is important to realize the fundamental reality of life, which is that we are one. Yet, there is no way to realize our unity without exploring and reaching beyond our human experience of judgment, right and wrongdoing, and the idea of good and evil. Neither can we get there without going through the powerful spiritual practice of forgiveness. Forgiveness, the F word, it is universal. So, quick reminders about forgiveness, just in case anybody was wondering. We are always at choice. We know that. It is always a choice to forgive. So, it's entirely up to us. It doesn't mean that we have to like what happened. It doesn't mean that we have to be in the lives of, people that we feel like may have wronged us. It doesn't mean that. I like what Susan Taylor said. She said, sometimes you just have to love people from afar and be happy with that, It does mean, however, that we have to accept the truth of the experience. In other words, we have to acknowledge that, yes, that happened. It did. It does mean that we have to give ourselves permission to experience whatever the feeling was and whatever that provoked in us. So let me say it like this. One author says that forgiveness does not mean that you forget or agree with the past, but it does mean that you release it and move on. Forgiveness does not mean that you need to resume a relationship or return to a situation that is harmful or abusive. It's not about denying responsibility for inappropriate behavior or condoning someone's hurtful behavior. It's about taking your lessons and realizations from the experience forward and releasing yourself from and anybody else from any indebtedness. To say that I had to work on releasing someone else from indebtedness is an understatement. So you may be asking yourself, why are we talking about this? We just, we're a New Thought community. We believe you want to focus on what's good. You want to call forth that which you wish to be and all of that. And all of that is true. And we still have the responsibility to clear and cleanse our consciousness. Whenever we feel like we might get stuck on something, it's the opportunity to kind of look at it and invite it to kind of sit with us and have it reveal its story to us so that we can clear it. Yeah? Yeah. So, we just completed our annual burning bowl and we selected our word for the white stone ceremony, and we still get to clear our consciousness. We still get to practice. So, because we know that we can't pray for something that we're not willing to look at, right? We can't pray if we're feeling sadness, if we're feeling, alone or separate. By just acknowledging it, we can affirm that we are not alone, that we are not separate. So, what I know is that we, just living, just being in a spiritual community like this, it doesn't mean that we are exempt from the experiences of life. Would anyone agree with that? Yeah. I mean, we still, you got to pay bills. We still got to interact with people. We're not exempt from that. But based on our teaching, we have a framework, right, in order to address the opportunities that present us, what one author says, the practice of soul-stretching experiences to find God in the midst of pain, also known as forgiveness. I'd like to quote what Dr. King said in his classic sermon, Antidote to Fear. He said, by the way, he would have been 90 on Tuesday. I don't know if anyone realized that, but he would have been 90 on Tuesday. But he said, a positive spiritual faith does not offer an illusion that we shall be exempt from pain and suffering, nor does it imbue us with the idea that life is a drama of unalloyed comfort and untroubled ease. Rather, it instills within us the inner equilibrium needed to face strain, burdens, and fears that inevitably come, and assures us, this is the thing, it assures us that the universe is trustworthy, that the presence supports us, that it provides. So what we do is we get to expand our toolkit, right? We get to expand the practices that we use so that when life presents us with these opportunities for growth, described this usually kind of camouflaged as pain or whatever, that we get to use the tools that we develop, like affirmative prayer, which is what we practice here, meditation and yoga, and working with a licensed practitioner. That's what we get to do. All of those work together to kind of help us cultivate that inner equilibrium that we desire. So, we, SLCA, are at a pivotal point in our community. We are in our meantime, right? So our meantime is that space where we're just letting someone go. We're releasing Reverend David, and we are in this in-between period. I like to call it our gestational period, right? Because we are intentionally thinking about and meditating on and focusing on what we want to come forth. And so the work that we do here now, in this period, in our meantime, helps prepare the way. The individual work and the collective work that we do as a community helps us to keep that channel clear. It helps us to be in alignment with the divine all the time. So we want to ensure that there is no interference on that line. It begins with forgiveness, of releasing, of letting go. And, you know, we use this phrase in the New Thought community quite often, that whole releasing what no longer serves us. Yeah, we've heard it before. And we hear it so often that I think that we really do have to be careful that it just doesn't become cliche, right? Because then it just kind of goes over. But it is asking us every time we hear it to dig a little deeper and to do the work. So we have to make sure that that's what we're doing. So, as a result of my experience, I believe that there were 4 fundamental questions that it asked of me on my path. The first one was, what did I have to let go of? For me, that story, what I had to let go of was the story that I was telling myself about myself, right? So somehow along the line, I got the message that I was irredeemable. Now, you know, if you think about that word, irredeemable, that's pretty heavy. It's like, you know, there's no savings, like there's nothing of value there. So I had to let it go. I had to say, you know what, that's just not my truth anymore. It is not mine to carry forward anymore. And I had a very profound spiritual insight as a result of this experience. I learned that shame sucks. All the way around, there's no way to escape it. Whenever it shows up, it sucks. And we just need to work on it, right? Like I needed to work on shame. I had to change the story. I had to reframe it from what they did to me, right? David Hawkins in his book, Power versus Force, says of shame that it's perilously close to death, which out of shame, as a conscious suicide, or more subtly elected, is a failure to take steps to prolong life. And we've all had some experience of, you know, kind of losing face and feeling discredited or feeling like a non-person. In shame, we hang our heads low. We want to kind of slink away. So, SLCA, what do we have to let go of? What stories do we have to kind of relinquish? What things do we need to let go of so that we can grow forward? Is there a little shame in the field? Maybe a little guilt, a little sadness? We had the intention setting seminar yesterday, and one of the things that came up was abandonment. Anybody feeling abandoned with this transition? Others might be feeling grief or sadness. What must we release? Second question for me was, I had to examine my part. Didn't want to, but had to. I contributed in some way to that mass of confusion that emerged on that Sunday evening. What's my responsibility? Often in New Thought, we're kind of told that, ooh, it was something in your consciousness that brought this forth, okay? You need to work on that, okay? So you did this to yourself.
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't know, because I don't remember at that age thinking, I would like to be embarrassed in front of my full community. So, what I can contribute to that conversation, though, is we have to be careful not to plague ourselves with thinking, what did I do to bring this on? To me, that level of self-recrimination does not serve us. That is something that we should really practice letting go. It does not serve us. As Reverend Ruth Wilkerson said, there is no need to attempt to trace the specific thought or personal concept that caused the unfortunate event in our lives. I like what she said next, because she said, just change the direction of your thoughts. Yeah? So, the next question for me was a real pivotal point, and I believe that it is also for our community. What did I learn? What did I learn from that? What was mine to take from that? What's the secret sauce here? You know? The first thing was self-love. I literally had to love myself back to life. I had to replace that thought of being irredeemable with that I am worthy to be, to exist, that I am worthy of love. That's what I had to do. I had to practice self-forgiveness for those areas where I felt like I let myself down. That became a part of the work. And sometimes we're not willing to offer that to ourselves as quickly as maybe we're willing to offer it to others. But it's a requirement. Self-forgiveness is a requirement. I also had to understand the context. I mean, this was like the 80s, and as a culture, we weren't talking about sex. We weren't talking about these things. And so there were a lot of ideas that were being expressed at that moment about what good girls did and didn't do, all of that. So I had to kind of come back and reframe that story and learn what the lesson was. I think for me, though, the biggest lesson that I learned through that is that I'm not alone. I wasn't alone. And I mean in that sense that when something like that happens, you feel alone, you feel isolated and separated. What I mean is that spirit that was present before I even emerged in this form was there to comfort me. There's a scripture in the Psalms that says, "Where can I go from your presence? Where can I go? If I make my bed in heaven, the consciousness of heaven in my mind, I'll find you there. If I choose to make my bed in hell, I'll find you there too." And that scripture actually gave me so much comfort, because I know that no matter how bad I felt, that I was not alone. And so, no matter where you are with this transition, no matter what's going on, what I offer to you is you're not alone. That spirit, that essence, that secret that sits at the center and knows is ever present, always aware, always guiding. That's what we can look forward to. So, what have we learned about ourselves here at SLCA? What have we learned to cultivate? How have we learned to cultivate that inner equilibrium that Dr. King wrote about? If I can take my observations from being in this community, one of the things that I love so much about being here is the fact that no one is excluded. I love that. It makes me feel like I'm a part of something that really matters and that we as a community are really trying to make the world a better place because nobody is excluded from this love. I've learned also, I've seen it demonstrated, that compassion, that compassion that, where we reach out and hold someone's hand when they feel a particular way, that compassion when we are sending people off and celebrating their lives, that kind of compassion. Yeah, we are working to create a world that works for everyone. And the last question was, where did I land? Having gone through all of that, where did I land? What was I going to take from it? For me, it was about 20 years later. And one day I'm writing in my journal, which I had been, writing for years at this particular point. And one day I was just tired. I was just exhausted, mentally exhausted, spiritually exhausted from just carrying the weight of it for so long. Yeah? And I wrote in big letters in my journal, regardless of what's happened in the past, I love myself unconditionally. And when I wrote it, and then I rewrote it, and I wrote it again, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, hold up, there's something happening here. Something is shifting, something is changing. All of a sudden, just from saying, you know what, I'm not going to allow that story to define me. And so that's what I did. I wrote it, and I would go back to it, and I would read it, and I would meditate on it, and I would say, regardless of what happened to me in the past, I love myself unconditionally. So, SLCA, where have we landed? I suspect our response would be the same. No matter what's happened, we will love ourselves unconditionally. That is our charge. So, a couple of things about forgiveness. Just a little reminder. Of course, it's a choice. And a few ways that we can do it is write letters, like I've done that. I'm sure many of you have done it probably in your own practice. I used to like writing the letters and then putting them in the shredder. There was something that was really satisfying about that. Or burning them, that was another thing. I would just be like, okay, we're going to do a little bonfire right here. So I employed that method as well. Affirmative prayers, right? Feeling like you need some additional support in whatever area of your life. We have practitioners that can hold the space and know the truth just in case you cannot experience that for yourself. Then there's meditation. I found meditation to be one of the most helpful tools for me because sometimes the emotion didn't come with a word. And I would have to sit with it until it would reveal itself, until the emotion would say what it is that is going on here. And by doing that, I would know exactly what to pray for. I would know exactly what to affirm in my life. And then there's the, forgiving, right? There's that part. I know it sounds simple, and really it is. And if you don't feel like you have the capacity, I'm here to remind you, you do. You can. You can simply say, God within me, as me, through me, I totally and completely forgive, and then fill in the blank. And then remember that 70 times 7. It is not linear sometimes. It is a process that you have to walk through. So, SLCA, I stand before you today.
Because that's not the end of the story.
No, it's not. Forgiveness is the seed that produces a new bloom. And as I know this for myself, I know this for each and every one of us. So, we have a few minutes left, and I would like to play. Can we? Yeah? All right, good. So, I want us to use our imagination. So, I invite you to get comfortable in your seat. Whatever that means for you, hands wherever you prefer, eyes closed, open, whichever feels right for you. Taking a deep breath. And hold it. And release it. I want you to become aware of any tension in your body and what that tension may be asking you to be aware of. Continue to breathe in and out. Are you feeling it in your legs? Or maybe in your solar plexus? Maybe there's something there. What about your chest or your heart space? Anything there? Keep breathing. What about your throat? Might it be trying to tell you something? Are you hearing anything or seeing anything? Is there any tension in your head that you've become aware of? Keep breathing in and out. Is your body asking you to be aware of any sadness or any anger or any guilt? Feeling abandoned? Maybe some anxiousness there, some doubt. For every single feeling that you experience, you begin to notice that there is a string in your hand at the end of which is a balloon. You think to yourself, wow, every time I breathe out an emotion, a new string with a new balloon appears in my hand. And there's a red one, and a blue one, there's an orange one too. The more you breathe, the larger the balloon grows, and more balloons are added. Soon, both of your hands are filled with strings filled with balloons. You notice not only are the balloons getting larger, but you begin to feel a lightness. The tension is gone. The tightness in your solar plexus is relaxed. And you're continuing to breathe. You recognize that that lightness just continues to grow and grow, and is even more palpable now. Soon, as the magic of our imagination is, SLCA is filled to capacity with all of these balloons. Everyone is holding them in their hands. And then, out of nowhere, the ceiling gently opens up. And we're greeted by the most beautiful sky. We can't help but look up and out of sheer gratitude in our hearts. We stretch out our hands, and just like that, release the balloons. We watch in wonder as the sky is filled with all of these beautiful balloons. We immediately feel the release of the sadness, the release of the shame, the guilt, or any other emotion that has kind of popped up. We are free. And with that release, we become aware of that inner state of peace. We trust and know, and we have faith. Another F word. that the universe can and will transmute and transform those emotions into states of being, of peace, joy, laughter, and goodness. And as the last balloon fades out of sight, we find ourselves back in our seats, feeling at peace with joyful anticipation of the world we get to create and the good that we get to experience. I invite you to open your eyes if they were closed. And I want to take you in again. I want to acknowledge the lightness that I see, the brightness, the goodness that we're creating. SLCA, I stand before you today. It wasn't for me. It's not for us. And as I know this for myself, I know this for each and every one of you. And so it is. Yes.